Hello, everybody. Okay, I think I'm live. Welcome to my live stream. I just noticed that like Aaron Newland Bentley's name was littered all over this. Like he just can't leave me alone, can he? That was obviously from the last one. So obviously he's not here, unfortunately. So I know that means that you're probably all very disappointed, but that's just too bad. So basically the purpose of today is for me to just kind of like just try this by myself. Because normally I come on here with somebody else, like, Ben Patworth and I have done a little concert, or I've been kind of chatting with Aaron. And I decided that I thought this was a good idea because I often get lots of questions, as I'm sure every singing teacher does, from their students, but not just from students, but from recent graduates and not so recent graduates, about just some different things that can happen, or different things that they're concerned about, or questions they've got about the industry, or technique things, or things that they just kind of want to kind of like bounce off of somebody like myself, who is kind of impartial and hopefully also just they're looking out for their best interests, really. And so I thought this would be a good idea to kind of like basically have an hour where I have a little rant about some stuff that I want to have a rant about, because, that's just who I am. And just take any questions that people have about technique, about things that they're maybe concerned about things that they're working on, or the best way to work on them. I am not necessarily going to be the expert that's going to be able to help you with absolutely everything that you need to know about, but like I might be able to point you in the right direction at least. So that's kind of like where I'm kind of coming from today. So that's kind of what I want to do. So if you want to take part in the conversation, you need to be viewing this on either Twitch or the YouTube channel, or indeed on my Facebook page. So not on my account, not on my personal account. You need to head over to the Scott Harrison Voice Facebook page and have a little chat in there. You'll see the video and you can chat, and it will pop up on my little box here, and I'll be able to have a conversation with you, and you'll be able to ask your questions in the chat box. So basically the first thing that I want to kind of talk about is a bit of a rant. And it's a rant that I'm sure some people have who know me have probably heard me have before, but I think it's one that's really important for us to have in the industry all the time. And it's something I was going to post up a few days ago, and my friend and the incredible vocal coach and vocal rehabilitation specialist Dane Chalfin beat me to it on Twitter. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and he said something very interesting, which is so true. And this is about the idea that how high you can sing has absolutely nothing to do with how well you can sing. And I think this is something that's really, really important for us to talk about, because it's one of the first things that people ask me about whenever they start lessons, or, at every single level, even people that have kind of got professional careers and are kind of having a professional life in the music industry or the musical theatre industry. They always have this question about, how can I improve my range? Like, how can I get better at this? Like, how can I get higher? How can I get lower? And one of the things I want you to really understand is that, yes, it's in vogue right now to be able to scream up the very top of your voice. It's not the best way to decide whether or not you are a good singer. Yeah, there is no such correlation between quality and range, or quantity even. So just take a minute to just think about perhaps what the real things are that are really important for singers. Like telling the story, which seems obvious, but it's so true. And people can be super impressed with your Z sharp up the top end of the piano. But if you're not being honest about really telling the story, or telling it in the most effective way possible, then actually you're not giving quality that audiences are hopefully going to pay you for. So I want you to kind of take that on board and really think about that as something that you should really be thinking about whenever you kind of come to do your practicing, because so many people spend a lot of time focusing their attention on trying to sing higher, trying to get bigger notes, trying to belt more, all the rest of it, when actually what's really, really important is to make sure that you just take a step back and focus on the middle of your voice, like focus on the quality of what it is that you have to say, and you'll find that your range will come up from that. So what I think is really important is to kind of like maybe just talk about what range actually is and how we go about kind of getting it, because probably the most common question that singing teachers get is about range. And I need to be able to get higher, or getting higher is a sign that I'm getting better. To some extent, that's like, it's in some ways that's possible, but not necessarily in the way that you think it is. Sean, no, I will not demonstrate a Z sharp tonight. If Aaron Newland Bentley was here, then I would try and persuade him to sing his Chinese opera, and you would be able to hear what I would call a Z sharp. But range might not necessarily be the way that you think it is for a couple of different reasons. So can you improve your range? To an extent, yes. So what is that extent that you can improve your range? Well, within the confines of what your muscles are actually able to do. So just like with any kind of sport or any kind of athletic activity, you can build your strength and you can build your stamina and you can build your flexibility. But there comes a point where you realize that your legs can't be any longer, or that your body can't be any larger or smaller. So for instance, like somebody like me that's 6'3" and just doesn't have the physical proportions for it, I am not built to be a professional ballet dancer. Regardless of how much I was to train to do that, my body's just never going to be the right proportions that would be required for that kind of task. And so you've got to think about range in exactly the same way. So range is like got to do with basically how long your vocal folds are able to stretch and how fast they're able to vibrate. I'm incredibly simplifying it here, like this is so much more complicated than that. But as a basic premise, let's go with that as an idea, okay? And so if you want to improve your range, what you're doing is you're improving your stamina, you're improving your flexibility, and you're improving your strength, yeah? Beyond that, can you improve your range beyond what it is you've naturally been given? Probably not. Yeah, if you are kind of very naturally a low bass baritone, you're not going to be singing high tenor anytime soon. So I think it's really important to take that on board, that actually the way in which to improve your range is building your strength, your stamina, and your flexibility, just like with anything in the voice. So when it comes to doing something like a dance class, for instance, or even playing a sport, do you always push your body to its absolute limit and stay there whenever you're engaging in building any of those things? The answer is probably no, because if you were to push your body right to its very extreme when you're warming up, for example, you would end up pulling a muscle, you would end up doing something that's going to kind of really actually kind of hurt that muscle rather than benefit it. So kind of what a lot of people, and I'm sure there's going to be people that are personal trainers in here, please tell me if I'm wrong in this, personal trainers or sports people who are more specialist than that I am, but like little and often, so kind of like lots of light reps are probably the best way to kind of help build up your muscles if you're going to be doing an athletic task such as kind of running, for example. So it's really important to think about that. Like what we're doing is we're building up the middle ground and we're making our voice as strong as we possibly can in the areas where it actually is most present, and then we work from there out. I think that's really, really super important. Yeah. I've already got some questions, which is really cool. Okay, so Adele, how can I thicken the sound of my voice in the higher register? So if you're talking about registers, you're talking about the idea of like what we would call like chest voice and head voice, or modal register and head register, falsetto register. There's loads of different terms for it, depending on kind of like what you've been learning. And so if you're talking about the higher register, you're obviously talking, or hopefully talking about the idea of like the head voice voicey type sound. So the first question that you need to kind of ask yourself is are you actually practicing things in your upper register, in your head register, in your falsetto register, whatever you want to call it? Are you actually spending time working up there just as much as you spend time trying to belt or trying to work on the lower part of your voice? And obviously I know you, Adele, so I know that you're a musical theatre singer, which means that chances are you probably don't spend enough time down the bottom end of your range, down the up the top end of your range, that you spend more of it down the bottom end of your range, where you're going to be thinking about making these big, thick, louder sounds because of the style of music that you're singing. So I think it's really important to, like, for anybody that's listening to this that wants to build up a kind of like a bigger presence in their upper range, the first thing you need to do is actually sing in it more often. I think that's really important, and it's something we often forget to do. So I want you to kind of like think about it like that. And other ways to think about thickening is, that's a bit like strength again and stamina. So do little and often, you know, like don't feel like you have to don't feel like the way that you have to do it is by bringing the bottom up, right? So don't feel like you have to thicken it by kind of like trying to kind of feel what you feel when you're belting up the very top end of your range. Really think about doing things like eliminating any extraneous breath. So like, you know, if you've got loads of extra breath up the very top, then you're not going to be, you know, very powerful as such. And then focus on resonance. So like really change up your resonance strategies and really think about kind of like maybe the darkness or the brightness of the vowel sounds that you create, or kind of like how much power you're giving it, because often you'll find that if you give something a bit too much effort, a bit too much power, then the kind of like the tail off of like how good quality it is really kind of dips quite quickly. So really just kind of like think about the other things that give you like that impression of thickness or that impression of strength in the sound. It doesn't need to be you trying to kind of like add more volume or necessarily add more thickness to it as such. That it can often be about resonant strategies as well. So I hope that helps. Madeline, how are you doing? Very long time no see. So yeah, on range, what if one was a soprano before and now can't reach those same notes? Asking for a friend. Well, what I would tell your friend is that to think about the context of what it is that you're talking about. So for example, if you are thinking about this and you're thinking about back to the voice you had when you were 15 and now you're not 15, and you are kind of like going, oh my god, when I was 15 I had such a lovely, wonderful like soprano range, I could sing up the very, very top of my voice. Your voice changes, and I think that it's really important to highlight that to everybody, that we obviously know that boys' voices break or change. I don't like to think about them as breaking, because nothing breaks, they just change and grow in a really strange way, perhaps. And we need to remember that female voices do the same thing. They do it in a different way, which is why we don't have that big obvious kind of that we get in male voices, or cis male voices rather. But in cis female voices, I think it's really important to remember that your voices do mature and change as well, particularly through your 20s. And through your 20s, you'll find that your range will kind of like will adjust and change as you kind of go through that period of time. I'm not sure what the current understanding of the science is behind it at the moment, but from what I remember, certainly what we used to think is that female voices mature in around about kind of 26, 27 on average. For male voices, so if there's any males watching this, cis males who or have larger larynxes, and you are kind of going, oh well, is my voice fully matured because I'm 21 and I'm out there in the industry? The answer is no. Those cis male voices and those people with larger larynxes have actually got another 10 years to wait, unfortunately. That generally speaking, those voices mature when you're about 30, which is kind of interesting. So male voices actually mature later than female voices. But for female voices, like just bear that in mind. So that might be the context. It might be the context that actually when you remember being a soprano that you were significantly younger than you are now. But I would also kind of like refer back to what I was talking about before. So when you really think about
reaching those really top notes, really think about how often you actually spend trying to kind of like sing in that range, and how often you're really taking the time to be a soprano. And what I mean by that is, sing in a more heady head, in a more kind of falsetto-y registration place. Like how long do you actually spend doing that during your practice, compared to when you're doing all of your kind of more belting, lower voiced, kind of speechy, modal, chest-like sounds. So if you really want to kind of engage with that part of your range again, you need to kind of like be a bit of a caretaker of it and really take the time to just explore it. And one of the big problems that we have as musical theatre performers, well, I'm a musical theatre performer, there might be other kind of performers listening, but any performers, is we have to deal with our ego, even when we're working on ourselves. So when we are practicing by ourselves, we still have that voice on our shoulder when we do something bad that goes, oh, that's rubbish, like just don't do that again. And actually, if it's rubbish, then that should be the reason why you engage in working and making that bit better, because if that's the weakest part of your voice, then you should really be spending time doing that. So like really take the time to kind of work on the things that actually you perhaps don't think you are great at, rather than focus on the things that you are really great at. But again, I think you've got to balance this. So if you're a professional out there in the world right now and you're kind of like looking to do self-tapes because there's not that many face-to-face editions, then obviously you need to spend time on the things that you're really good at and the things that really like show you up to be the best possible singer. But you need to kind of therefore think, well, actually, if I want to be more than what this little box of what I can do offers me, then I need to make sure that I have almost like a second practice time every day. So I have my practice time when I'm working on all the things that I'm going to be doing in the audition room, but then I also need to have a second practice time when I'm working on the things that actually don't make me feel quite as comfortable, and are kind of like and allow me to push myself a little bit further than perhaps what I would do. So I would say to you, like, really take the time to add on the idea of engaging with those higher parts of your voice, and that goes for gentlemen, cis males, and people with larger larynxes, including people like trans females, etc. Because we have a habit of really enjoying the large part of our voice. I'm like the worst person to be given this advice, because like I get it so wrong all the time. But I think you really need to think about making sure that you really focus on that upper part. Even if you think, well, I'm never going to use it professionally, it's not about that. It's about giving your voice balance. And so really focus on kind of just like, just lightly vocalizing in your falsetto, in your head voice, whatever you want to call it. I think that's really, really important. But hopefully that helps. But yeah, thank you so much for that question. Get more questions in, people, by the way. So just to remind you, so if you're watching this on my personal profile, you need to head over to my page, which is Scott Harrison Voice. So if you type that into Facebook, or you can watch on Twitch, or indeed you can watch on YouTube as well. I'm assuming the YouTube thing is working. I'll find out after this is done. Yeah. So basically that's that. So I want you to get some more questions in. If not, I'm going to go on another little rant that I think is really important, and I know what I'm going to say. One of the things that I really want to talk about, I was going to do a Facebook post about this, but I wrote it a few times, and I really feel like I would maybe come across as a little bit aggressive. So I decided that I would talk about it here so that I come across as less aggressive. One of the things that I want to kind of like try and talk about just now, again, it's to do with performers' ego. I'm sure it's not just performers, but obviously I'm going to talk about it from this perspective because this is the perspective that I know and I see. every single one of you that are watching this, that are my friends, you are all beautiful people. Like, you are actually all genuinely really beautiful on the outside and on the inside. But we have all, and I'm just as guilty if this is anybody else, we have all fallen into some issues where every single picture on our social media needs to be like our performer's headshot, and everything is filtered like beyond recognition. And I know that this is, you know, who am I to talk about this, you know? But I think this is really important because one of the big things that's really important in the performing arts industry especially is the idea about looking after ours and everybody else's mental health. I would love to see a study on this. This is just my opinion, you know, so like please feel free to disagree. But I really genuinely feel like that the more that we are filtering our lives and the more that we are filtering every picture we put online or adjusting it and not putting anything out there that's not perfect, the more we are not actually looking after our own but everybody else's mental health as well. Because as a performer, you're constantly looking at what's happening around about you in the world, to get some clues about, okay, so what's the next show that might be coming around to audition for, or who's in what show, so therefore I know what I kind of like, what I'm kind of aiming for in terms of like, well, that's what's being employed at the moment and things like that. If we are constantly putting out filtered content into our personal profiles and our personal social media circles, what we're doing is we're telling everybody else that we don't have any issues or we don't have any problems, and that in itself is not so much of a problem, but it is a problem for the person looking at it, that's looking out there and maybe struggling in different ways and seeing every single person out there through this kind of rather fake lens. Because let's face it, like the amount of people that I see now that I know are beautiful people who have literally filtered their face beyond recognition, like that's not a true representation of who you are. Like I would love to like try and like spark up a conversation about how we can use our kind of like creativity as individuals to kind of like let the thing that we share, not necessarily positivity, because actually I don't think positivity is necessarily always the way to fix the mental health issue that we have in the world at the minute. In fact, kind of fake positivity is probably one of the causes, in my opinion. But actually, one of the things that we can really do is really kind of like highlight the wonderfulness of our personalities rather than the wonderfulness of our faces after they've been run through several filters. I don't know how to do that. And I feel like I've tried like throughout the years to kind of do things like that. Like I remember there was like a whole period where I just like shared poetry instead of like statuses, and like, you know, but it didn't catch on. Like the second you put a like majorly filtered picture of yourself up, you know, then all of a sudden you are not. Then all of a sudden you get way more likes than you putting up a beautiful piece of E.E. Cummings that, you know, touches your heart. So like I think that we all need to hold ourselves a little bit more accountable for this, and I'm talking about myself too here. You know, I don't really take selfies very often, but like, you know, I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. And so I think that like we need to start with ourselves, and we need to kind of like start a little revolution, like even just in the performing arts industry, to really show who we genuinely are and be really proud of that as well. Like be actually genuinely proud of who we are and what it is that we've got to say in the world, because, you know, we are performers. We have what we've got to say is way more important than honestly like how beautiful we look when we've kind of like slapped on a couple of love hearts around our face and like, you know, edited our freckles out. I just think it's a bit silly. So anyway, that's like my old man rant for the day. But yeah, so please get your questions in. So Josie's got a question. Advice on minor lisps and tongue root tension, please. Okay. Right, okay, there we go. So there's Josie saying, sorry, before I answer your question, Josie, she's received more likes and responses on her filtered selfies than she's done when she's been trying to kind of like raise money for a good charity. It's so weird, isn't it? Iona says, I think we put too much value on recognition we receive on socials. I agree. Definitely trying to cultivate that recognition by being a better friend, colleague, ally in person than my online persona. I think I said this in the previous live stream, but lockdown has really given me the opportunity to like really think about who it is that I really want to spend my time with, and like who I really want to spend my energy on in my life. And like, don't worry, like if I've not messaged you recently, I don't mean that I don't want to spend my energy on you, but like the first person is me, right? Like the first person that I've realized that I really need to spend my energy on is me. And so kind of therefore me spending energy on myself is not necessarily trying to get recognition from other people. So I think that's been one of the kind of silver linings of all the stuff that we've had to go through with the problems that are going on in the world with the pandemic. So yeah, let's go back to the question. So Josie asks about minor lisps and tongue root tension. So for those of you that are listening that don't know what tongue root tension is, it's basically any tension that we feel in the back of the tongue. Like most people in the world have some form of what people would call tongue root tension, but like most people don't need to worry about it at all because it doesn't affect your life. But it is something that performers have to deal with, because basically every performer that's currently watching this stream will tell you that when they've gone for a singing lesson, or when they've gone to drama school or they've gone to any kind of vocal or voice expert, that they've probably been told to some degree they've got tongue root tension and a tight jaw, or a tight jaw. It's kind of like part of our favorite language in this industry. So let's like talk a little bit about exactly what it is. Now, rather interestingly, and I'm sure if he's watching this, I can't really see who's watching this, but I know that if Rick Lipton watches this, he's probably going to really get angry with me for misquoting him here. But when I worked for Rick Lipton at Mount View way back in the day, oh God, it was literally like 10 years ago. Rick used to talk a lot about the idea that most people that claim to have tongue root tension actually don't have tongue root tension. I could be completely misquoting him here by saying that at one point I remember him saying something along the lines of, I don't really think it exists as a problem. But I could be wrong with that. The way that Rick Lipton talked about it was that people just had their tongue in the wrong place. But I think that what that does is it really hits on kind of one of the main things that we can think about in order to make ourselves better at this. So if you have a tight tongue or you have a tight jaw, it's because you're holding it in the wrong place. So the first thing you need to do is you need to really think about kind of like where your jaw and your tongue need to be. So let's talk about your jaw first of all. Just like let it go. So one of the things that you can really do to really think about kind of how tight your jaw is take 2 fingers and just put them lightly on your temporomandibular joint, which is basically where your jaw connects to your cheekbone. And you'll feel just little strap muscles here, yeah? And if you just clench your teeth like really, really tight, you'll feel that pushes out. You'll feel the muscles push against your fingers. And then what I want you to do is I want you to let your jaw go to the point where you feel those muscles just completely relax. You'll find if you continue opening your mouth, they'll start to tense up again. So that means you've done too much, yeah? So just find the point where your jaw just completely lets go. Yeah? Now, very, very rarely will you need to open your mouth any more than that, if ever, whenever you're singing or speaking. And often singers who overexert that tension in the jaw will run into some issues. Which will often, the first port of call often, in my experience, is navigating its way into the tongue as well, because obviously they're fairly closely linked. So just make sure that the jaw is not the main instigator of any of that tension. And then think about where your tongue needs to be for different sounds that you make. So where does your tongue need to be? Well, there's no right or wrong answer to this, because your tongue will be the thing that manifests itself mostly in your accent. So depending on your accent, your tongue will just live in a different place in your mouth and will just go to different places in your mouth. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, part of the problem with old school training, the kind of training I received, this was not a problem that any of my teachers had as such, but just the general kind of ethos that we kind of like had as performing artists, and it's something that's still prevalent in a lot of schools, is the slightly classist idea, and I'm talking about like socio-economic class, that RP is the go-to thing that we should all be trying to achieve. And as somebody from the west coast of Scotland, I do not agree that my story and the way that I tell it is any less valued or valuable than the stories from the people from Surrey and Hampshire and Wiltshire and Berkshire and these kind of places that speak with a typically more estuary RP accent. I don't necessarily agree personally that we should be using that as the gold standard of like whether somebody's good at acting, speaking and singing. So where does my tongue sit as a Scotsman? High and back. Do I care? No. But the difference between my tongue and somebody that potentially has excessive tongue retention is the fact that I can move my tongue to different places when I need to move it to different places. Whereas somebody with tongue retention finds that they potentially have a bit of an issue moving it into different places. Okay? So you might have seen like loads of different tongue exercises. One of the most famous ones is putting the tip of your tongue behind your teeth. That's a lovely sound, isn't it? Sticking your tongue out like that with the tip of your tongue behind your teeth, yeah? Doing that while you've got a loose neck. Doing it with sound. Things like that. Doing things like moving your tongue in 4 different directions and in circles outside the mouth. Etc, etc. All of those general things that you tend to see people doing with tongues and things like articulation exercises are really good, but remember that the way we should be thinking about doing it is thinking about the accuracy of where our tongue is going rather than how fast the tongue can move, because often the way that we'll do that is just by tensing it up even more and stopping it from moving in different places. So it comes back to the same idea we were talking about before with regards to range, strength, flexibility and stamina. So chances are you probably just don't have very much flexibility in the tongue, so just do some things that really stretch the tongue out. Yeah, and I think that that's really funny to kind of like think about, because often we think about like our accent as being a kind of barrier to us playing characters, but actually I think we need to be like embracing who we are even more. Again, it's just like we were saying about like kind of like filtering our lives, right? Like we should just be celebrating the stories of where we come from and kind of like what it is that we have to offer. And I think that's going to just make everything better in the long run. So Madeline says, that's so funny because I was going to ask you about the jaw being too open. My practice has not been great this summer, and to get loud belt notes out at the moment my mouth opens so wide. Okay, so the thing is, Madeline, right, see when you're belting, if you watch most of the best belters in the world, they open their mouths wide, right? That's absolutely fine. It's fine to open your mouth wide if it naturally wants to open a little bit wider, but just be careful that you're not pulling your tongue back and pushing it down while you open up your jaw. Yeah, the whole point of opening wide presumably is to get that more kinesthetic sensation of space and kind of the ability to move your voice in that way. So as long as you're not closing off that space through other mechanisms like the tongue, then actually you'll be fine. Like it's really no problem. You know, embrace opening up your that part of your voice. So yeah, but that's what I would say about that. Does anybody else have any more questions on jaw and tongue? That seems to be something I get quite a lot of questions about all the time as a singing teacher. But generally, like I said, you know, even just sing with this and just see if you can kind of maintain as much release as possible. Okay, I want to talk about something else which I think is really important, and if I've got other singing teachers here, like I might be sounding like a little bit shady towards some of you perhaps, or some of like other teachers that you may or may not know. But I see lots of posts on lots of the forums now where they're kind of like, where lots of kind of teachers are kind of vilifying the idea of like tension and effort, right? And like when you're doing voice research and you've got like singers like lying down on their backs in CT scanners, you're not going to get accurate results of what it's like to be performing on the West End stage or at the Royal Opera House or on national tour or in a fringe venue in a theatre above a pub, right? You're not going to get an accurate representation of how people actually have to use their voice professionally to tell stories. So I want you to be very, very cautious when you kind of are told that you shouldn't be feeling effort in your in your body and in your voice. I want you to change the language. I want you to think about making it so that you always feel appropriate amounts of effort. You should be feeling the least amount of effort to still do the task adequately. But if you're dancing full out for like 10 minutes and then you've got to like belt your highest note, your body's going to need to use more effort than when you're kind of like attached up to electrodes and standing in a clinic with a bunch of people taking measurements. So all of these results that people are getting in these scientific papers saying the science says that you shouldn't be feeling this is not an accurate reflection of what we need to think about as musical theatre or opera or pop or whatever performers. Yeah, clinical kind of like benchmarks are not useful to us as performing artists, because we have to be, you know, like really multifaceted human beings. We have to do so many different things so many different times. Yeah, and I think it's really, really important for us to really like give ourselves a bit of a break. If it feels like it's hard work, then just embrace that. Don't be put off by that. I get so many people, especially like younger performing artists who like maybe starting off their undergrads, who are terrified of practicing because they're like, it still feels like it's hard work. Yeah, because you're learning how to sing. Of course it feels like hard work. You know, like embrace that. You know, you shouldn't be feeling like the most perfect vocalizations every time you open your mouth. If you did, then you're probably not actually accurately thinking about the right things. So don't be afraid of a little bit of hard work, I would say. I think that that's really, really important to think about, and just something for you to all to take on board. So that's kind of like my little rant about that. That we've got to just all be really kind of careful about how we're kind of saying this stuff. Should we be using lots and lots of effort? No, we shouldn't be using lots and lots of effort. So we certainly shouldn't be using effort or tension extraneously at all. But we shouldn't be afraid of the fact that actually the tasks that we do are blooming hard work. And so really kind of, you know, just embrace that and enjoy that a little bit. I think that that's really important. So get your questions coming in. Please feel free to kind of ask anything you would like to ask. And basically if you want to kind of ask a question, you need to make sure that you come on to the Scott Harrison Voice page group. I don't know what it is. It's a page, isn't it? I'm such an old man when it comes to social media. Or watch on Twitch or watch on YouTube. And get your questions in the box for at all. I want to do a little shout out. First of all, so this is like my time to do like a little kind of like shout out. I'm not being paid for this, but I want to give a little shout out to Associated Studios in London, which is an amazing musical theatre academy and school that's run in central London, Latimer Road / White City kind of area, very, very central. And we have a gorgeous new home there. And just to let everybody know that we have some places still on our brand new master's course, and we are particularly interested in having more males. Yes, males and male presenting individuals, please. Just because it kind of like helps us be a bit more representative as well. So if you are somebody that's maybe considering doing an MA, we can offer that to you, and it's a really, really wonderful course. We're so excited to start it. It's the principal is Leontine Haas, who is just a wonderful, wonderful individual and an amazing singing teacher and vocal coach. And we have the most incredible team of people, including people like Sam Spencer Lane and, you know, like just really awesome people, Michael Fry, and just these amazing people. But on top of that, we also have like a kind of special scholarship that we're handing out from Jeremy Irons. Yes, the famous actor Jeremy Irons is funding a full scholarship to Associated Studios. Jeremy is one of our patrons, and he will be on the panel for the scholarship. So if you fancy doing an MA, or you would actually fancy coming along and auditioning in front of Jeremy Irons, then please go to associatedstudios.co.uk. Yeah, I'm going to just put that in the chat for everybody. So that's just my little shout out for everybody. Associated Studios. I think that's right. I've got really bad eyesight, but hopefully that's right. But yeah, so get over to Associated Studios if you can, and like get in touch with us if you wish to take part in that. And you know, if you're abroad, so if you live in Australia and you're like, God, I really wish that I could take part in that, but I'm from Australia, we actually have Associated Studios Australia as well. So I'm not sure what the address for that is, but like I'm sure that if you Google it, you'll find it. But yeah, so that's my little shout out to my little Associated Studios family, and all the incredible work that they are doing just now, especially during this lockdown period. So good luck to all of them. But yeah, so get your questions in if you have any more, or otherwise I'm just going to go on another little rant, another little chat. So I'm taking any questions about anything to do with singing or voice. Loads of people have been asking loads of questions about technique, which is really super exciting for me, because obviously that's the thing I really love talking about. But I'm happy to talk about other things as well. So one of the things I want to kind of like talk about today is the way that the industry's moving in terms of just kind of like being seen, and some of the things that we can do as performers to start already thinking ahead. So obviously the whole COVID situation has really moved this forward in a really big way, but it was going that way anyway. And what I mean by that is that we need to start thinking about the art of self-taping. So this is something that I was not taught at college, and this is something that the places where I teach are not really teaching self-taping. That's slightly a lie, because actually Associated Studios did some wonderful self-taping classes for students over the past couple of years, but most of the schools that I teach in, especially musical theatre, don't really teach the whole self-taping thing, or if they do, it's from a more acting-based perspective. But that acting-based perspective doesn't necessarily offer us all the answers that we need to have in order to understand how we're going to do it as musical theatre performers. So a couple of things that you really need to start thinking about if you're a musical theatre performer and you've got to be thinking about self-taping, okay? Here's my little checklist of things that you need to be thinking about doing. First of all, get your rep sorted. That's obvious, but it's really important when you're doing self-taping, because what you might find is that there's some songs, right, that you have to do that you would do in a room that just work really, really well when you're in person, but when you're putting it on tape, it just doesn't sit right. Like, it just doesn't translate well. And so you might find that actually you might need to find other songs that you are going to need for your self-taping based editions. Yeah. So for example, I'm going to use an example. I was helping somebody with their self-tape the other day, or yesterday. And one of the songs that they had was Forget You by CeeLo Green, right? And it was, that was one of their pop songs that they had in their folder. And we sang it, and I can totally see why that person had that song in their rep folder. I can absolutely see them smashing that in editions. But when we kind of did it, and I kind of watched it, and, we put it on camera, I just went, oh, this just doesn't look good on camera. Like it just doesn't translate well. Do I know why? Not quite yet. Is there a way to translate it effectively? Probably yes. In fact, definitely yes. I'm sure that somebody like Sherry Sanders would absolutely know how to take a song like that and put it on camera. But for you doing it yourself, if you're wanting to do a musical theatre based performance of songs, then you need to really think about whether those songs are going to be proper for the self-tape. So that's number one. Get your rep sorted and really think about whether those songs will translate well on camera. The next thing that you need to really do is like have a conversation with your agent about what things and what casting directors are currently asking for self-tapes. Yeah, obviously that's most of them at the moment, right? But kind of like as we go forward, it will be quite a significant amount of them will be asking for self-tapes for first rounds. So I'm at the minute, I know I'm giving all this information away right now, but at the minute, I am creating a course with the wonderful Nina, who's the head of voice at Italia Conti, and we are creating a 3-day or 2.5-day self-taping course for musical theatre performers specifically, where people are going to be able to take away a professionally recorded self-tape at the end of it. So I know that this is maybe me plugging that, but I'm not plugging it because we're not at the stage where I'm going to yet. So this is me just offering some of this advice, and we'll be going into this in more detail on the course. But contact that agent and really think about how you can maybe start already doing some of that work. So what I mean by that is that think how many times in your life as a performer, if you're already out there, and if you're a musical theatre performer who's currently in training, then know that you're going to have to deal with this too. That often when we go for auditions, we get thrown curveballs all the time. Oh, can you come in 2 days' time and prepare all these songs that you don't already have in your folder? And you don't really have any time to do it because you're working full time and you're kind of like resting job, and there's just all this stuff like going on in your life, and then so you just have to go in and just hope that you remember all the words, and you often feel like you haven't really shown yourself off in the best possible way. And so one of the things that you can really think about doing is do all your self-tapes in advance, right? Because you're going to be sending them off as tapes. So assuming that you're not planning on like getting really super skinny or really super fat, or like kind of like, changing your hair drastically because you've got like hair down to your backside and you're going to shave your head or something like that, start doing them now. Like actually start recording all your audition material like tomorrow, right? And because you can redo it again and again and again and again and make it the best possible version of that tape that you can get. Because the thing is, your slate at the beginning of it is probably going to be the same for every single tape. If you have like, sometimes you'll have like things where they'll ask really specific things. So for instance, like somebody was needing a self-tape actually during lockdown and asked my advice, and they were like, they want me to talk about myself for like 5 minutes and just kind of like just give some anecdotes about who I am and yada 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 yada. And like, so add that in, like just edit that in at the beginning of the tape and like fade out, fade into your song, and just wear the same outfit, like really kind of like do everything in advance, so that if they don't ask for that, if they're just asking for a basic like thing, your 2 edition songs, with your regular slate at the beginning with your agent's details or whatever, then have it all there. Upload it to something like a Google Drive where you change the settings so that people can kind of like get in touch with it, or whatever, however you want to upload it, and literally already pre-send it off to your agent. And just say to your agent, there's all my audition material there. Like, if you want to submit it, you don't even need to ask me. Just tell me you're submitting it, but just go and do it. And then that way they're not having to wait around for you anyway, yeah? And then you totally get brownie points from your agent as well for being really super organized. Yeah, so really start to think about this, because this is something that we're really going to have to think about doing. You're like, maybe in the next kind of like live stream, I'll talk about like technology and kind of like the technology that I advise that you think about kind of upgrading to. If people think that would be useful, let me know in the comments if you think that would be useful. I've just spent a lot of money on upgrading all of my equipment, including this wonderful, beautiful microphone that I'm using just now. But yeah, like I'm totally happy to talk you through all of that and kind of give you some hints and tips about that as well. So maybe we'll do that on the next live stream. But yeah, so we've got a question. Georgina, hi Georgina. Missing lessons with you. Oh, I miss lessons with you as well. Like, I miss teaching you. You're such a wonderful, lovely singer. Any ideas for helping to feel lift in the soft palate? Okay, so there's a couple of little things you can do. Again, none of these are my ideas. I'm totally stealing these from loads of different teachers over the years. Yeah. So open your mouth and just like relax your soft palate, your tongue, whatever. Yeah. Now stick your finger in your mouth. When you stick your finger in, you'll naturally feel your soft palate recoil away from your finger. Yeah, so that's one way to feel it. One of the other things you can do is think about sneezing. So when you're about to sneeze, that feeling, that's you lifting your soft palate. And just like thinking about, like sometimes I'll say that to people, you know, just like sing on the sneeze. And it's basically just to get them to lift a soft palate. But kind of like also doing things like gi, ge, ga, go, goo, and really thinking about kind of having your soft palate down and touching your tongue when you go the g, and then when you do the g into the vowel, you lift your soft palate up rather than letting your tongue do it, so you don't go g, 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 g. You're not kind of dropping your tongue, you're lifting your soft palate away from your tongue. Hingi, hinge. So that's a really good way of doing it. Yeah, those are a couple of my favorite ways to do it. Yeah. Yeah, hope that helps. But yeah, the soft palate's kind of like a bit of a weird one. Like often you'll get lots of teachers kind of and lots of singers kind of going, oh, you've got a very nasal voice. But often what they understand about nasality, and so basically for those that don't know, if your soft palate is basically the kind of the little space between your nose and your throat. Lifting your soft palate up means that your sound comes out the mouth, and putting your soft palate down means that it comes out your nose. And so it's all linked into this idea of having a really nasal sound. And often people think about nasality as being this kind of like really super brightness in the sound. But actually brightness and nasality, although can be linked, are not synonymous with each other. That you don't necessarily need to be nasal just because you're bright, and you don't need to be bright just because you're nasal. So one of the things that you can do is kind of like do the nose test. Yeah. So if you do a sound like E and you squeeze your nose, the sound doesn't change. So that means that my soft palate is up. That means it's lifted. But if I do he and the sound still comes out, but it changes, then that means that my soft palate is not fully up. And if I go and the sound stops, it means that my soft palate is fully down. So try the nose test. And you might be quite surprised, because there might be somebody that you kind of think is a really nasally singer, or maybe you've been told that you're a really nasally singer. And if you do the nose test and the sound comes out your mouth, you realise that it's not nasality, it's just there's maybe you're over brightening some things that you're doing with your voice, which is a slightly different thing that we can think about doing. So anyway, yes, that's my question. I'm going to stay on for another like 5 minutes. So if we've got any more questions, then I'm totally happy to take them. I've actually really enjoyed this. It's kind of terrifying doing this by yourself, especially because like you're very aware that you talk lots, and like that you don't necessarily know if anybody's actually listening. But I guess that's the same when I'm teaching as well. So yeah, you never know whether somebody's actually listening to you or not. But yeah, get your questions in. Any last questions at all? Everybody that's watching this, could you do me a favour? Could you all head over to the Scott Harrison Voice channel on YouTube and like give me a little subscribe, please? And that would just be like super wonderful, just because I'm going to start putting other videos that are not live streams up there as well. And also the live stream from me and Aaron Newland Bentley is also on the YouTube channel as well. So please get over there and just give me a little subscribe if you can. It's Scott Harrison Voice. Just have a little search for it. And I'll put it in the comments of this. Hang on, I'll need to try and find it. Let's see, because I'm not like famous enough yet to kind of like have my own thing with it. You know, where you kind of like have your little handle. Scott Harrison Voice. Here we go. So let's see what it is. My channel. my channel. There we go. I think it's this. Let's copy this and move this into the live stream. Double check. Yes, it is. Okay. So that's my little YouTube link there. So head over to my YouTube channel and give me a little follow, please. That would be amazing. I promise not to spam you with lots of things. Yeah. But thank you so much, everybody. Oh, Daniela, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. I hope this has been helpful. I hope I've been able to answer some of your questions. I kind of want to do this semi-regularly because actually I really enjoy doing it. And I really feel like I often get loads of emails and kind of like Facebook messages and stuff from people, and I really do love helping people. So I really feel like I would I would like to do this a little bit more, because I feel like I can maybe kind of like answer questions that loads of people ask but they don't want to, or want to ask but don't feel like they can. Madeline says, I love watching your singing lessons on YouTube. I love watching singing lessons on YouTube. How do you feel about posting any of your sessions? Well, I think that depends on me finding a student who'd be willing to actually do it with loads of people watching. But little shout out for anybody that's still listening. It's now September, so next month I'm going to be doing the national webinar for the AOTOS, which is the Association of Teachers of Singing, and we are actually going to be live streaming that webinar, and there's going to be hopefully lots of people watching it, and it's free of charge, so you can all take part in that. And I'm going to be giving a chat about something I've actually done classes on. So we're going to be talking about the hero's journey, which is what we call monomythic story structure, and about how to use that as a way to make your choices better in your songs and actually improve your technique. And so as part of that, I'm actually going to be coaching two singers. So I'm going to be coaching Michael, and I'm going to be coaching Lydia, and I'm really looking forward to that. So please, if you can, head over to the AOTOS website, AOTOS, Association of Teachers of Singing, and you'll find all the details there. I'm going to be doing that next month in October. And I'm really looking forward to that, and I will be teaching people there. So if you are interested in watching me coach people, then please come over and do that then. But thank you so much, and allowing me to have a little chat with you all. And I will see you all later. Bye.